whatever changes you're making should be for your own sense of well-being and your own kind of sense of accomplishment and to make you feel like a better version of yourself. It shouldn't be to appease other people, especially other people that like you're never going to talk to again.
Content warnings for this episode include misgendering, anti-trans bigotry, dysphoria, mental health, drug abuse, religion, bullying, and self-harm. Genderful would like to acknowledge... Oh, go ahead. You do it. You do it. You do it. It's pink. It's yours.
Genderful would like to acknowledge the indigenous peoples and unceded lands that the producers, hosts, and guests that lived and have dwelt upon. Today we honor the
Salish,
the Mohawk, Algonquin, and Anishinabewaki,
Tsalaguwetiyi and Mvskoke,
Salish and Nisqually.
Tongva.
We honor the elders, the human, plant, and animal ancestors of these lands, and celebrate the living descendants of these peoples. May all beings tend these lands for the goodness of the next 7 generations and beyond.
Howdy, folks. Welcome to Genderful, a talk show interviewing gender-diverse people about their special interests. Hi, I'm GenderMeowster, and my pronouns are they, them.
Hi, I'm Miranda, and my pronouns are she, her.
The focus of our show is to interview trans, non-binary, agender, two-spirit, and gender-diverse people regarding their special interests, passion projects, and resources for the gender-diverse community.
We want our audience to know that we hold multiple diverse identities and bring these lenses to the show with our passion for telling our stories.
I identify as non-binary, trans-masculine, polyamorous, ADHD, autistic, and disabled with chronic pain and mobility issues. I also am white and reside in the United States.
I identify as trans-feminine, neurodivergent, queer, and a person of color residing in Canada. We invite you to remember that we are whole people with robust lives, friendships, challenges, and successes. We love and are loved, and we are delighted to share these stories with you.
As always, we kindly remind our listeners that no person is a monolith of their identities. Your identities can change over time and are valid every step of the way. And if you think you're gender diverse, you are gender diverse. There's no social or medical prerequisite to be included in the community. Welcome, everyone, to Genderful Podcast, a show interviewing gender-diverse people about their special interests. Today is November 6th of 2023, and it's Job Action Day, which I learned about in the last 6 months or so. So we're chatting with several very cool folks about being trans at work. Our esteemed guests for stream today are Tofi, they, them, Miranda, she, her, Gaby M, they, them, and TransCapybara, she, her. Welcome to Genderful, everyone. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to have all of you here.
Such an honor to be here.
Excited.
It's so
Very
exciting.
Excited.
So some of you have been guests on Genderful before. I think maybe Gaby is the only one who's not been a Genderful guest. Is that right? Question marks?
Yeah. Yeah. I got really excited to be invited to this. So yeah.
I'm excited to have you here. Your first ever? That's exciting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice.
Usually it's one of those
Welcome.
like, okay, it's recorded and then post.
Yeah.
This is exciting.
That's so fun. I love that. Well, I might take a moment to ask Gaby a couple of the questions that we have already asked the rest of you in previous episodes, just because we always do that at the beginning of the show. And then we're going to dig into our trans in the workplace topics. So Gaby, if you would be comfortable sharing, what are some things that you can trace back to your youth that indicated you might be gender diverse one day?
The first thing that came to mind was playing in a playground, probably like 3 or 4 years old, when I went up and made friends, like one of my first friends, and was like, hey, do you want to play Robin Hood and Maid Marian? I'll be Robin Hood. Root, like full. I'm like, oh, that'll take, 30 plus years to manifest. Didn't know what it meant at the time, but maybe I did.
Yeah. You're like, I'm ready to be Robin Hood. I'm prepared.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that so much. Gaby, how has your relationship to gender evolved over time? You went from being that wonderful kiddo to the gender splendor being that you are today. And I know it's continuing to evolve, right? You haven't arrived. It's an ever-changing thing.
Yeah.
But if there's a short version of that, because I know we have questions about coming out at work that we're going to get into as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'd say pretty much like from coming out to myself as lesbian, gay, I kind of use those interchangeably kind of through high school, through college. And then kind of very, very much like in my 30s was when I started like questioning my own gender and like figuring out like what it all means. And cut to today, this live stream, realizing that I identify as many things. And what I once kind of didn't like about labels, now I'm like, I can get all the labels and like that's fine. And I can continue to add on different labels or archive some, but who knows? Maybe it'll keep, maybe the whole point is that it'll keep changing.
So my other thought for our panel today, before we dig into these other questions, is if we want to take a moment to just go around the circle, around the Zoom room, and introduce ourselves. Maybe name, pronouns, any identities that you hold that you feel would be relevant to share. And if you want to, you can just read your guest command. If you're like, I wasn't prepared for this question, you can literally just read your guest command. But if there's anything else you want to add or tack on, just so that folks kind of know who is here. So maybe we'll do Tofi, Capy, Gaby, and Miranda in that order. And I'll write that in the chat for us.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Tofi. I use they, them pronouns, identify as agender, non-binary / agender, all in that trans umbrella. Definitely a no label goblin, or Shrek gremlin, whatever no label Shrek over here. I am ace, and I think I'm also aro. I've been trying to figure out my aro identity for a couple months now. I think I'm aro-ace, ace-aro. And I am also Chinese, but a very assimilated Chinese person, which I think is important to note. I've had a very white experience growing up because my identity was stripped from me, because my mother did not want us to have any sort of cultural heritage, just for ease of fitting in and, racism. So I'm a very assimilated Chinese person, and I am queer as well, and probably autistic. Learning that out as well, which is great. So
welcome to the group.
Yeah. Identity soup over here. Yeah.
I love it. And Tofi, did you share what your job is, or the version of what you do for work that you want on Twitch recorded?
Yes, thank you. I am a senior data analyst, and the lead of a LGBTQIA plus pride ERG at my job for a large healthcare organization. So yeah, do a lot of programming.
Nice. All right. Next up, we have TransCapybara.
Hi, everybody. So I am professionally a principal software engineer for a major tech company that works on enterprise storage. And it's kind of dry after that. It's very much your eyes glaze over, but yeah, a software engineer by trade. But the other sort of the gay part of my job is that I am the co-lead for what we call the transgender task force. And so I am basically like the head trans person for this major tech company for North America, and get to participate in editing our documents, especially one that we have as a white paper guidebook available for trans employees to help themselves to come out at work and be their whole selves at work and gender authenticity. So I'm very proud of the work that I do, and I try to put our major tech company into a spotlight, which all the other trans folks around the world can look to as a beacon of hope in some ways. Other than that, I am GenderMeowster's wife, and I am an aromantic, gray ace, lesbian, autistic, ADHD, the soup, right? It's the soup. And trans woman and Gen X. So I get all of the Gen X jokes, and I kind of get some of the newer ones too. I kind of try to keep up on that. Yeah, and everyone should know me. I make funny noises and funny little songs, and yeah, here I am again.
Yay. And Capy is white for those who are listening. You cannot see her.
I am white. So white. All right.
Awesome. Gaby, you're up next.
Hey y'all, Gaby M, they, them pronouns. I work as a creative consultant and strategist for a digital studio within advertising, or specifically an ad tech company. So it's both technical, both creative, both advertising, at a pretty large ad tech firm. And pretty much kind of one of the things I'm navigating in my career right now is kind of coming out a second time as non-binary, gender fluid, gender non-conforming. Again, part of that we're all talking about. And one thing that I like to think about, especially working in a very gendered industry, all industries are gendered, but I'd say in advertising, where it's kind of where a lot of stereotypes tend to originate from sometimes or perpetuate, is kind of part of why I was attracted to advertising and I stay in advertising. And I'm Puerto Rican. And I really like, Tofi, how you mentioned assimilated. So Puerto Rican assimilated, I would say. I've lived in the mainland US, or what's known as mainland US, for most of my life at this point.
Awesome. Thank you, Gaby. Next is Miranda.
Hello, I'm Miranda. Those of you who are longtime viewers / listeners know who I am. I'm one of the co-hosts on this show. So I use she, her pronouns. I'm trans feminine, and I'm of Arabic / North African descent. And unlike some other panelists on the show, I was very much not assimilated at an early age. But I mean, I was born in Canada. I grew up in Canada. I'm very, North American in terms of my, culture and sensibilities, but I'm also first generation immigrant. So yeah, there's a lot of that's mixed in. I identify as queer, neurodivergent. I am a mental health advocate, as I deal with a lot of mental health issues myself. And I'm allo-romantic, allosexual. So, for those, the arrows and the aces, oh, I envy you sometimes. So yeah, I'm a content creator. I have a YouTube channel where it's mostly comedy videos, but I also do video essays about being trans. And I don't typically talk about my work on the show or in other online spaces, but here we are talking about being trans in the workplace. So I am an economist with the Government of Canada. I have a master's degree in financial economics, so I work on a lot of finance statistics and that sort of thing. So I've been in the public service for about 7 years, and prior to that, I had a prior career as a stockbroker. So yeah, I was a finance bro in another life. So but yeah, I'm happy to share my experiences of being trans at the workplace and kind of my journey with that. And in terms of advocacy at the workplace, I'm also involved with the Positive Space Initiative, which is it is a LGBTQ advocacy group throughout the public service, both at the federal and provincial level. Something that actually started with the Ontario Public Service is now growing to cover the entire federal public service. So I'm one of the representatives or ambassadors or champions or whatever word you want to use at my departments, and or I specifically one of the things that I tend to focus on is supporting trans people in the workplace with their transitions. So I've actually helped a couple of my colleagues with their workplace transitions. And funnily enough, I use all that knowledge to help with my own workplace transitions. That was a fun time. I was helping someone with their transition as I was going through mine. So But I feel like I have rambled enough, and we have some actual questions to get to.
You did a great ramble, and I loved every word of it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And I've tried to add everyone's titles and stuff to the scene, including me, because I'm hosting. Haha.
Mm.
I'm also producing today because that is what happened. So, for those who, if this is your first episode, you heard my identities and stuff in the intro, but I'll do it again quickly because it feels more complete that way. My name is GenderMeowster. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a transmasculine, non-binary, white, multiply disabled, wheelchair using, autistic and ADHD person. And content creation is my full-time shenanigan. This is part of that content. So if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe on Patreon because we need your help to keep going. So if you are valuing this mischief, that's a great way to do it. You could also check out Ko-Fi, the GenderMeowster Ko-Fi, if you'd like to make just like a tip or one-time donation. And we actually have really cool stickers that I made with my friend Mirami and some other friends. And so they have this pattern. This is not the sticker. This is a mouse pad, but it's a calico Nefertiti hugging, sort of cartoonized, hugging a pride heart. And there's 7 different pride things, including disabled,
I mean,
autistic,
it could be a sticker
trans,
with enough blue.
non-binary. What?
It could be a sticker with enough blue.
I guess so. So yeah, if you want one of our cool stickers, I handwrite you a little note and send it to you in the mail, and it's really cute. And then you'll have something that I wrote on in your house, plus cool stickers. So those are on Ko-Fi, and Patreon is a big part of how we keep going. So anyways, that's information about the show. It's uncommon for us to have multiple guests on the show. I can think of one other time that we had 3 guests. No, 2 other times. But I didn't have a co-host. And this week our co-host is also our guest. So we have 4 guests.
I'm doing double duty this week.
I don't think we've ever had 4 guests before. So that I remember. If we did, I'm sorry to that other episode that I forgot you right now. But this is very exciting. So it's Job Action Day, which is a thing I learned about recently. I maybe talked about it in the pre-show, but not during the actual podcast. And Job Action Day is about finding a job that you love and doing that. And so I thought, oh yes, we should have a panel interviewing trans people who can afford to live. Figured that out at least a little bit. And how did you get there? Because, there's so many people who, because of COVID or whatever reason, have sort of run into what I might call a failure to launch. Just we're in late stage capitalism. Everything's hard. Jobs are really competitive to get into right now. And I know for me and for others, it can be really anxiety inducing to think about, I'm trans. There's so many people trying to get this job. How do I even get into it when there's 500 people applying or whatever? And then how do I advocate for my needs, especially if you have multiple marginalized identities? Maybe you're trans, maybe you're a person of color, maybe you're disabled, maybe other things, your immigration status or whatever it is. And so navigating all of those things to find a job is really intimidating, I think, for folks. And so I wanted to have this panel, knowing that you all are not the holders of all the answers in the world, and knowing that you can only speak from your own perspective. And none of us are a monolith of our identities, right? None of us is I speak for all trans people. I speak for all white people. None of that. That's not what's happening here. But yeah, just that's sort of the point of today. So I will launch into our first question that is written down. Let's see. Do we have any questions about applying for work? I don't remember if we had one. I think I wrote one somewhere. So I'm going to ask it, and then I'm going to go find it and put it at the beginning because that's what I want to start with. How did each of you go from person with whatever degrees you might have or not have to having what I would call a good job, a job that has benefits, a job that is supporting you in your daily life, that you maybe are not having daily struggles and stress about basic survival, like housing, clothing, food, that sort of stuff. How did you get to where you are? And I might like to keep the turn order with the order on screen. So Tofi, TransCapybara, Gaby M, and then Miranda, if that's okay with folks.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like I got really, really lucky. So I was not trans whenever I didn't know that I was trans. I happily identified as a cis woman whenever I entered the job force. But I definitely got extremely, extremely fortunate that the place I work at took a chance on me, because I work in a healthcare research company, and my degree was in criminology. So nothing to do with healthcare at all. But in my criminology degree, I mainly focused on data analytics, statistics, programming. And so I actually did more statistical and programming classes than I did criminology classes. I just liked the research part of the criminology, because criminology is like what I enjoyed, topic wise. And so I did a lot of, I didn't do internships because unfortunately I'm first gen and didn't have any, and don't speak to my family at all, cut them off. And so I did everything on my own throughout college. I'm a first gen college student with no contact. And so I had to work 3 or 4 jobs, 70 hours weeks in order to survive throughout college. And in that, I did some research jobs with with mentors. So they weren't internships, but the people I was my professors that were kind enough to mentor me, let me do some of the programming work that they were doing for their research papers that would get published in journals, because they had the ideas in their brain, they knew what data sets to point me to, and they didn't want to do the hard work of programming. And being able to program at 4 a.m. after work was perfect for me, because I was like, all right, I've worked my full day, now I can go do all my homework and do my programming and get my names on papers, because that's really what a research job was looking for, was have you done programming on research papers, have you presented at conferences, how your mentors being able to provide cover letters, or not cover letters, reference letters, that's the word, reference letters talking about the kind of work that you're doing and the kind of collaboration on those projects and how much research you did versus how much learning different statistical programming you learned. And so that's kind of how I got around it. And so I got very lucky, because the job that I'm in usually requires a degree specifically in statistics or in healthcare. And I think they had just done a rework where they weren't looking for that. They were more looking on experience of can you take this thing, apply the programming language, and have an outcome with it. And that I feel like I was just very lucky in the timing of that, because if I'd gone in a year earlier, it was just timing. Because if I applied a year earlier, them seeing a criminology degree, they would absolutely have just thrown my thing away. And so I think part of it was getting super, super lucky in the hiring manager, seeing that and seeing not just stopping at the cover letter, not just stopping at seeing the criminology degree, and actually reading through and doing their due diligence of being oh, even though they don't have this specific degree, at least they've got, experience with research. At least they've collaborated with research papers. They've spoken at a conference, things like that. So
awesome. Thanks, Tofi. What about you, Capy? How did you get your good job?
Well, I wasn't trans when I got it. I mean,
I'm noticing a trend.
I've been at the place that I work for 16 years. I started out at a startup and worked there, and then that startup got bought by a bigger company, and then that bigger company got bought out by an even bigger company. And so I've been in the same job and working around the same people with the same product, but it's been 16 years. So I would say, oh, let's see, how many years was it? I started out in 2007, and then came out around 2016. So it was 9 years into my job. And, at that point, my work had been established. People knew people knew the quality of work that I was producing. I was well liked. I made an important difference, so it's kind of like unfair to compare me to anything, really. If folks are trying to get into a workplace already out and then trying to look for work, we'll have to ask or get the perspective of someone that's done that, because I have not. Yeah.
Thanks, Capy. Gabby, tag you're it.
Yeah, similar trend. I didn't identify as gender nonconforming or non-binary when I came out of college. I did identify as queer, let those terms for myself. And how to get the job. I went to or one of the universities I went to was Northeastern University, and they had a predominant, like pretty big professional development program. At the time, it was called the co-op program. I don't know if they still call it that, but basically, it's almost like an additional prerequisite, like to graduate, to basically like literally you have to take a class on like writing your resume versus a CV equivalent for, cover letter, interviewing. So it was almost like career prep was part of my first years in college. And they pretty much planned their whole curriculum around like doing semester long internships in between taking classes. And my first summer, pretty much after my freshman year, I was like, I'm not going to wait my sophomore year. I'm going to start the summer after my freshman year. And I looked out and got like a PA internship job in New York City. And after that, I was like, I want to figure out how I can get back to New York City from Boston, where Northeastern is. And I want to try and keep interning while I go to school. So that's where I transferred to NYU, mostly like to be able to work while I was studying. And then that paid off. I got into a program for like recent grads at a major TV network. And that kind of helped me get into media. And it was, I think, because from the get go, it was kind of instilled, networking, like, kind of, I had these resources that I could take advantage of. Like that definitely helped set a certain tone, but it was very much in a, I'd say like a cis environment, like very much cisgender environment. I remember it was probably seeing someone else who was gay or queer mentioned they had a boyfriend or a girlfriend. I can't even remember who this person was. But the fact that they seemed to me as like, oh, they seem higher up or in management or something, that like seeing that like they work on the same floor I do, that I go to every day, like that gave me a little bit more confidence to actually even just come out as gay. Um, and yeah.
I love that. What about you, Miranda?
So it's actually my road to get where I'm at is a very long and winding road that loops back upon itself. So I'm gonna give I'm gonna give like an abridged version of how I got here. So um, I was kind of identified as a gifted child. So I actually started university when I was quite young. I started university at 17, and I dropped out because I wasn't mature enough. I tried to make it work. I stuck around. I had failing grades for years, and that's kind of how I stumbled into various different careers. I mean, I've had a lot of different jobs in my life. Like I've done tech support, I've done sales, I've done emergency services, I've done like literally everything you can possibly think of. I worked every like quote unquote poopy job that you can possibly think of. And then I kind of stumbled into my job at the bank, being a stockbroker, because I knew someone that worked there. And I ended up staying there for about 5 or 6 years. And I was making really decent money there, but I absolutely hated my life. It was a really, really high stress job. And this was in the late 2000s during the financial crisis. So I was on the front lines of the financial crisis, having to deal with people who basically got their life savings wiped out. And it was a very, very stressful time. And management was not treating me very well. And that's kind of when I got diagnosed with depression. And it was, if anything, I'm underselling it. It was bad. It was really bad. So one year I just kind of decided I had enough. I cashed in all my vacation pay. I left for like 3 weeks. I came back and I just quit my job. So that's when I kind of made a decision to reinvent myself. So I actually went back to school. I took a year off just to de-stress and decompress and collect unemployment for a year. And yeah, I went back to school. I got a bachelor's degree in economics. I got a master's degree in financial economics. And that's when I started kind of applying everywhere. So, I was very well suited to, working at various different finance companies. So I applied to, banks, investment banks, brokerages, that sort of thing. And I was also applying in governments. And it turns out when you're in your 30s and you have a big gap in your employment history, it's really hard to be competitive with 25-year-olds who are just coming out of college with no prior baggage. So it actually took me about a year and a half to find a job after I graduated, and it was pretty touch and go. Like I was working at a game store sweeping the floor.
Mm.
I actually had to go back and work at an even worse call center than the one I quit from, just to make ends meet. And that's when I got the email. I got my offer letter from the government of Canada. They wanted to hire me, and I got the email while I was on my shift. I went for my lunch break, and this is one of those places where you can't have your phone. So
Right.
I could only access the internet by going to the break room. So I went to the break room. I saw the email, didn't even finish my break. I went straight to my manager's office. I'm like, I'm done. That's it. We're quitting.
No 2 weeks
Yeah,
notice, nothing. You're out.
no notice. I didn't even finish my shift. I'm just like, no, I'm out of here. Bye.
The second you could leave, you did.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, I'm laughing about it now, but it was, I kind of, when we did like my episode, I kind of go a little bit more into like my mental health struggles. But yeah, things were pretty bad for me. But that's kind of when I got my job with the government, and finally doing something that I can use my degree for. And this entire time I was identifying as a cishet man, and I really didn't have the space in my life to really explore my gender identities. So that came much later, and luckily I'd already kind of done the groundwork where I work for my transition, because like one of the first things I did when I joined was join the LGBTQ group, even though like I identified as cishet. It's like, oh well, I just want to be a good ally. But subconsciously it's like, no, we're getting ready. We're getting ready. So yeah, that's basically how I landed where I'm at. And now I have a very comfortable government job that I'm probably gonna stick it out here for another 20 years and then retire on my government pension. So living the dream. I'm one of those like, overpaid public servants that you keep hearing about on the news. So
I think we looked at a meme on the meme stream last week that was basically like, I want video games with worse graphics that are shorter, made by people who are paid more, and I'm not kidding. It's true.
yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't think being paid a lot and not working yourself to death is a bad thing. Like, I don't
Oh
want the
yeah,
people that I love to be just eaten by capitalism and
absolutely.
like
So
get
I
chronic
mean,
disabling conditions because you're overworking yourselves. Like, I don't want
absolutely.
that
I
for
mean,
you.
I've had the high stress finance job,
Yeah.
it was rough. And like right now, like I'm being paid well below my salary potential. Like if I wanted to go back to the private sector, I could probably make twice or three times what I make right now. And it's fine. I don't need that much more money. I mean, it would be nice to be able to afford to buy a house in Canada, which is, I know it is the unthinkable dream, but work-life balance counts for a lot. And, when you're 25 and you have all the energy in the world, sure, go work your 80-hour, like high stress, finance, like Wall Street job, go for it. But, when you're in your 40s like me and you have chronic conditions and, you just come out of a 2-year disability, yeah, I'll take the lower stress job for less money. Like, as long as my needs are being met, I'm very fine with that.
I ate a chip right as you were wrapping up, because of course I did.
I timed that on purpose. I'm just kidding.
So while y'all were talking, I've tried to triage our questions because there's so many of us with such great opinions that I was like, oh, I need to combine all the things and just like topic, go, and then have everyone info dump about that topic. So the next topic is about coming out at work. And so also the first half of the show, my plan is it's going to be sort of focused on personal stories, and the second half of the show is maybe recommendations for employers. You're welcome to sprinkle in answers to stuff everywhere, but that's just sort of the general arc of where we're trying to go. So for those of you who came out while working a job, what was that experience like? Who helped you the most during that process? When, if ever, did it feel safe to come out? Socially at work, like, did you choose to only tell HR, and why? Did you choose to tell your coworkers, and why? And was there time between? So it's sort of like tell your coming out story, but there's all these little questions around it. I will put these questions also in the Zoom chat so that you all can look at it. And, we'll talk about coming out a second time as a separate question, but just in terms of your first time coming out, like, how did you make that decision, and why, and when did you do it, and who did you tell first, and how did you navigate figuring all of that out? Do we want to go in reverse turn order this time for the lulz? Okay,
Sure,
so
yeah.
Miranda, Gaby, Capy, Tofi.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was an interesting experience for me. I didn't do the things the way I would have chosen, but so for context, I figured out I was trans around December 2019, January 2020. So yeah, I had to come out during a pandemic, which was fun. But a lot of things made it a lot easier for me. So definitely because of where I work, it was pretty straightforward. And the fact that I already work on the committee that does this, I had already personally helped someone through their transition, so I was well aware of all the policies and procedures. So we actually have best practices laid out in the government of Canada, in the public service, not just my department. Like, this is something that like all departments follow. So I was well aware of that. So it's basically coming out at work at first was fairly straightforward. I mean, I messaged my supervisor and I said, hey, I need to talk to you. I got something personal going on. And then we had our meeting and it was like, hey, I'm trans. Here's the directive from the government of Canada about supporting trans employees. Here's a list of things that you need to do. Here's a list of things that I'm going to do. Here's what's going to happen in the next few months. So I basically did his job for him. So I made things super easy for him. But because this is like all during, like, this is before return to office, this is like we're all working remotely. Him and a couple other people that I'm actually friends with at work were the only people that knew. And it wasn't until like several months later where I came out at work. But I mean, that was basically just my director sending an email to our division saying, it's like, oh, this person is now using her name is now Miranda, she's using she her pronouns, and if and when we return to the office, she'll be using the female restroom. And that was it, really. I think I got like one email from one of my coworkers congratulating me. So I mean, I was out, but only like the people I directly work with kind of knew about it. So it wasn't until I returned to work. So I actually returned to work about 2 months ago because I've been on disability leave for a couple of years. And now everyone's back at the office. And now it's like I'm coming out again, because now I'm at the office in person presenting female. And there's a lot of people there that the last time they saw me, I was presenting male. And depending on whether they work in my division or not, maybe they forgot who I am. I mean, I've seen a lot of people do a lot of double takes in the office. So so it's been an interesting experience because it's basically there's a subset of people that know that I transitioned, and there's a subset of people that kind of might have recognized me because they saw me walking around in the halls or whatnot. So yeah, so I'm only now starting to do the social coming out component, and so far it's been fine. So I mean, government is pretty safe when it comes to marginalized groups. So like we have, disability community, we have LGBTQ community. So like um everyone's in a union. Like if someone's going to discriminate you based on something you have no control over, there's going to be problems with HR, and there's going to be problems with the union, and so yeah, that's if anyone has a problem with me being trans in the workplace, they have to keep it to themselves, or they're gonna suffer some serious consequences. So, but yeah, I'm still kind of figuring that out, and I've made no secret of the fact that I'm trans. So like I have a permanent office at work, and it's decorated with all my gay stuff. I made like a customized nameplate that has the Pride Progress flag and the transgender symbol on it. So, and I go in with my like denim jacket that has all my trans pins on it. So, anyone with a couple of brain cells to rub together is going to figure out that I'm trans. So, so yeah, that's kind of been my experience. It's an odd experience. The pandemic has made a lot of things very, very strange. So,
Yeah. And I'm also, I'll be curious to hear from the others how common it is that you basically had to train your boss or your HR on how to deal with you coming out as trans. So, Gaby, you're next.
In short to that question, it's
Yeah.
still a work in progress, but it's
Yeah.
very much very similar
Mhm.
to what you were saying, Miranda. And being someone who tends to like take on more than I should, I had to remind myself of like, this isn't my job. I need to literally be like, this is what I'm worried about. Please, please go do the research that you need to do. Um, my current job, I've been at my current job for 8.5 years, and uh, and I didn't come out as gender nonconforming, non-binary until about a year and a half ago, 2 years. So yep, like mid pandemic. I was already out as queer, lesbian. That kind of happened like um after I got hired, like my first month there, I made it pretty clear that I was engaged, got married, have a wife. So like that was kind of what was easy for me to come out as. I definitely would still get questions like 8 years ago of like, oh, and a lot of that I was much more femme presenting. And I think too, like I came out of my job before this current one where I'm at kind of seeking like a more open environment. I worked in TV networks for many years before advertising, and that like I had to leave a job that like was very much like microaggressions, from a person who I knew like walked the parade, like the Pride Parade, and like made a lot of donations for the oh my God, I'm blanking. But anywho, someone who probably would not think they could even be homophobic, or even transphobic or anything like that. So I left traditional media to move into digital media. And to be honest, like I knew like this is 50-50. It's kind of I'm hoping that kind of a digital environment or more tech environment, um, at least folks would be more open. I looked out that my bosses at my current company, you know, very open, very willing to learn. Like they very much were like, cool, let me know how I can be of more help to you. And if you're ever uncomfortable with anything, let me know. Now, a year and a half ago, when I'm like, oh, okay, something's up with my gender. I definitely had to get more comfortable at home, kind of like trying at home, like what pronouns even, like what even, like even just me learning about what a gender journey could look like. And then how that translated at work, it started with my queer peers, kind of like speaking with them and, being like, hey, like, how can we be more inclusive of everyone? And then when someone was like, oh, like, how about we start putting pronouns in our, like, really encouraging our colleagues to put their pronouns in their, you know, name, usernames and emails and things like that. And just by having that conversation with a peer and just being like, you know what, I'm just going to put they them pronouns on there and see what happens. Nothing happened because no one reads because no one reads pronouns. But that, even that small step for me just made me so proud that I could do that. And now, even now, I have to, for my own, what for me is kind of my own level of safety of like, practicing saying my pronouns, like in meetings, like if it's an internal meeting, I'm more used to it. If it's with a client, I don't really know what the clients are going to be like. So I kind of choose kind of what level in terms of what my comfort level is between the different audiences I speak to. But something that I've been feeling more empowered to speak to is I do a lot of thought leadership as part of my company. So I do get to go to conferences and kind of speak on stages. And within the last year, especially now being in a leadership position in my company, I've been much more empowered to speak up more, not just for myself, but for people on my team. I'd say, and my company right now is like 1,000 people. I maybe know myself and one other person who either has some kind of gender journey for themselves. But I think starting to have that as a leader in the company has definitely given me made me feel more empowered than when I was coming up. I know it's kind of really hard to speak up when you might feel that, I was a PA. I feel like when I was a PA, there were a lot of things that were said that I was like, definitely a microaggression. I had just learned what a microaggression was, and I'm like, that happens all the time at my work. So now that I'm in a leadership position, I'm definitely trying to kind of use those powers for good. And it might still feel uncomfortable for me personally, but definitely what drives me is the little change. And one story I'll share. One of the first times I mentioned that I was non-binary, was at like my very first conference after the pandemic. And it was definitely going from like speaking to a camera like this to going to an in-person 200 people and literally mentioning that my pronouns were they, them. And I gave a scenario of, oh, as an audience of one, like I work in advertising, I can't be targeted because usually everything is done by like male and female. And I had so many people coming up to me afterwards just being like, I never thought of that. And then the payoff was the like one queer person who came up to me afterwards and was like, we've never met. I know it's technically still pandemic times. Could I hug you? I'll keep my mask on. Because they were just like, I've never heard anyone in leadership actually speak to the queer experience in a work like conference. So they were just like, I felt so seen. And that like really, I think that kind of first interaction, kind of coming back to in-person conferences really made a difference. And it definitely like spurred me to kind of continue to be an advocate more openly in my thought leadership.
Thank you, Gaby. I appreciate you sharing that. For those of you who are on Twitch, the Twitch chat is going wild with conversation while we're also talking. So if you, I will make a point of clipping this VOD so that the Twitch chat is also saved. If anyone listening to the podcast wants to see all of the other discussion happening in the chat, I think if I highlight it, it'll be there. So, anyways, Capybara, if you'd like to answer what it was like for you coming out at work, and anything else you want to make sure you share about that experience.
Absolutely. So like my dysphoria got to the point where I was able to Google the symptoms. And then I'm like, wow, this is like weird. Like I'm a woman, really? Yeah, it was and then whenever I had that realization, I read a little further and it's like, oh, to really like treat gender dysphoria and go the way that you want to go, you have to do like HRT and talk to a therapist and do all these steps. And it seemed like a lot, but I was willing to go through with it all. So like when it was time to like tell my work people, I had done a lot of stuff like kind of under, sort of just like clandestinely, to take our go into HRT, go to therapy. Work did not know about any of this stuff. It eventually became time to let my coworkers know and my management know about what was going on, because I needed to, I was now at that point to come out at work. So the first person I told there was my manager. And then and that went well, actually, and really my coming out at work was a best case scenario. There wasn't really any hangups. So this is what a best case scenario looks like. You come out to your manager and your manager's like, awesome. And then you go to HR and you come out to them and they're like, awesome. We have a white paper that, a guidebook to help us with your coming out at work. To this is what you do, and this is what we do, and this is what we message to your manager and their manager, and let your entire engineering team sort of know what's going on, and educating people. Like they had flown out a trans person from Boston to hold a seminar with all the engineers and educate people on Trans 101, just so that I wouldn't have to do it. Right? So that was pretty cool. And that was coordinated, very tightly coordinated between myself, HR, my manager, the director, like head of engineering, and we all sort of coordinated on this one day. I send this email, and then this person sends this email, and then this person sends this email, and it's all just very laid out. And that's what we did. We followed the playbook, and it was great. And then after I, sent my email and and then engineering manager sends their email, and then like head of engineering sends their email. Then I get like 50 replies to mine, like, oh, some just like every awesome reaction ever. So that was pretty cool, actually. And it was great because it was like on the home front and on my my family side, it wasn't so great. They had a hard time with it, and one of the realizations is that when one comes out, you're watching everyone grieve. Every single person goes through their own grief. Some don't come out of it. Some still just get stuck in a loop and will be there for years. And to this day, there's some people that are still stuck in that loop. I don't expect them to ever escape it. And that's just really, it's hard to live with, but it's also kind of like I need to move on with my life, right? So, and circling back to the work thing, what the one, the thing that really did truly help is that document, that the guidebook that helped HR like know what to do. Otherwise, it would have been just like me trying to coordinate it and let people know and educating folks and all these cis people that have never really met a trans person before or interacted with them in any way or knew what they, or knew what their needs were. So it was, I'm honored to curate and distribute and kind of proselytize this guidebook for my own company. And I am also trying to work on releasing a public version of our guidebook for everyone else too. So, I want to pay it forward, and I want every trans person that works for a company to have the resources available to them to be able to cleanly come out at work and have it be a great experience and have like that support and that community. So yeah, and this was back, I did this back in 2016, and I'm sure that, things have progressed quite a lot since then. So like that guidebook that I had used didn't really, it was kind of very he, she, gender transition. You're going from one to the other and then you're done. But now it's been expanded to include non-binary coming out, to have gender fluidity. People are, day by day, they could be one gender and another gender and another day, and that's great. And, there's really never an end. And to set that expectation with people and employers and your coworkers and all of that. So it's important work, and I'm glad I'm doing it. Yeah.
Thank you, Capybara. All right, Tofi, what was it like coming out at work?
Yeah. Oh, it was a wild time. Well, it wasn't like a bad time. It was just stressful because I feel like, I also came out during the panini. It was like a year and a half to 2 years into my job as identifying as a cis woman. And we had, before I started, like the year or two before I started, they had created like the Pride Employee Resource Group, ERG for short, as well as the Trans Inclusion Committee. And I like joined those as an ally. So I joined as an ally. And then, slowly figured it out thanks to a lot of Twitch channels talking about their identities, and people, being like kind enough to do panels like this, talking about identities. And I eventually like slowly started figuring out, and I went from very specifically in the Trans Inclusion Committee because we have over 1,000 people at our company, but oh, here comes Tofu. But like a dozen trans folks at the most. So we've like less than 1% people at the company who are trans, and most of them are white trans people. And so I didn't know a lot, like mainly just in the queer community, mainly just specifically in the Trans Inclusion Committee. And so finding that space one was very important, and that really helped because very specifically in that group with like 6 people, and like four of the 6 people were non-binary. I went from using she, her pronouns to she, he, and they, like just randomly switched up during the day for a couple months, then to they, he, and then now I just use they, them in those specific groups, but I use they, he at work because unfortunately, just because I still constantly got misgendered as a she, because my dead name is a very like gendered woman's name. Like you hear it and you think white woman, which goes into the assimilation part of my Chinese heritage. But because my legal name was such a woman's name, quote unquote woman's name that people pegged, I ended up having to change my name to a man's name, not a name that I would like. I use Oliver at work. Don't really like the name Oliver, but I needed something that wasn't gender neutral because of how often I was getting misgendered. And so I've got a quote unquote man's name at work, and I use they, he pronouns to everyone except for the Trans Inclusion Committee. The people in the Trans Inclusion Committee know that I just use they, them, but for safety reasons, for ease of surviving in a corporate environment with a whole bunch of white men, like, I had to do something, and I do not have the spoons in my brain to continually educate people. I don't want to. I'm too lazy. I do not have the mental energy when I'm already busy as heck. So it was a time. And so it was a very fun, like it took like a year for me to figure all that out. Because I went through so many different, pronouns. And it was very nice to have that space and to learn and to like really figure myself out, because I feel like everyone should be able to have the space to do that, even if you do end up realizing that you're just cis, you know, for you losers who are just cis, just kidding.
Imagine.
Just kidding. Imagine. It's nice to at least go through that identity journey.
Yeah.
Sorry, just kidding.
It's so funny.
He's vibing. Yeah, you see him. Look at that's Tofu. Yeah, so it was a time, and I feel like, it's also the same, like, because I work with a lot of clients, just how Gabby was talking about, because I do some work with clients and with like CMS, the Center of Medicaid Services, and with like some specific states that sometimes do not have the most trans friendly policies, but we still do work for them, because even in our work, we want to make sure that the trans people living in those states have the best access to healthcare as possible. So we don't want to just like not work with them, because otherwise that would kind of screw them over, right? So even whenever I'm like reaching out to clients or whenever I'm working with clients, I also am very, what's the word? I'm very, very considerate of what I don't think considerate's the right word, but I very much acknowledge what my email signature is. I make sure that I do not use non-binary pronouns. Like I make sure that, in specific client-facing situations that could cost us work that would affect trans people in a negative way, I try to make sure to have to think about that, and so that's like I feel like that's a ongoing thing for a lot of trans folks who do like client work and things like that, is like we constantly have to think about those situations in order to make sure that we're safe, we're protected, and that the work that we do doesn't get cut off because of our identities. So it's a time.
It is. So now that we've each had a turn to sort of share about what it was like coming out, I want to sort of open up the style of our conversation and have it be more discussion and you all responding to one another. So the next question, I'm flipping the order of the questions because I feel like it is responding to something that Tofi just said. We're not going to use the raise hand feature. I think it'll mess everything up. So it'll just be chaos. Or you could write in the Zoom chat and let me know, you want to be in line or whatever. But so what are some ways that you have either had to or have chosen to protect yourself at work as a trans employee? Maybe if you're disabled or a person of color, anything really. It's trans, but it's any marginalized identity. Like, what are the ways that you've had to be mindful or spend extra spoons to navigate those things? So Tofi just mentioned like different email signatures with different clients, depending on if they're cool with being trans or not. And anyone can answer that question. How have you had to protect yourself at work? Yeah, go ahead, Tofi.
Just to continue on, yes, all the things, I got my man name, I got my he, they pronouns at work, depending on the situation, or he, him pronouns, depending on the situation. And another thing is like, because like I am on HRT, I've been on a low dose gel since August of last year. But because like my voice was so high pitched, like I go back to videos and like VODs of me and I'm just like, who the crap is that? Like it's wild how much it has changed, which is so nice. And so because like I'm privileged enough to work from home. But like the thing is like I am not on video ever, because people still see me and see woman for some reason, no matter how hard I try. Because, again, think about privileged people and the types of demographics who work in healthcare statistics. And so have to do a lot of unlearning, right? And so I very much am never on video, and whenever I am on like any sort of like audio call, I constantly have to have my pronouns on there and constantly have to have my name and my pronouns, even though I'm the only one who ever does it. And I always drop my voice. Like they're like, if you do any type of voice training, you know about like head voice versus like chest voice, and chest voice is something for like a deeper voice. And I'm always talking like low like this and like gravelly and trying to make it seem like this is a cis man, which helps with my man name. And so that's definitely something I always have to do now, which, you know what, I'll take. It's better than being she, her. It's better than being woman for me and my identity. So those are just on top of whatever all I just said, all those two. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, only with very specific people.
The voice is a very big component. I mean, just basically like you can get gendered based entirely on how you sound. And so like speaking of someone that has gone through, you know, speech therapy, and, you know, for those of us who are MTF, we don't have the benefit of, like, our hormones do nothing for our voice.
That's right.
It's all perspiration, baby. So yeah, I mean, I also like sometimes I watch old videos, old WODs of myself, and it's just like, ooh, I used to sound like that. Oh my god. But I'm fortunate insofar that I don't have any external clients that I deal with. My only clients are internal, and the vast majority of my meetings are with my own personal work group. So like, you know, the same, you know, the same, you know, 3 or 4 people. So that in terms of like protecting myself, I'm very fortunate in the fact that there aren't really any serious threats to my safety in the workplace. So I mean, if someone wants to, you know, give me a microaggression in the hallway, or if someone wants to yell at me for using the women's room, I have the ability to deal with those. So I mean, I can bring it up with my manager, I can bring it up with HR, I can bring it up with my union rep. And my workplace is very serious about that sort of thing. So that's kind of one of the benefits of working in a very large institution, is all that stuff is kind of enshrined in the workplace regulations. It's very different from working, you know, at a very small company or a startup or something like that, where they may not even have an HR department. So yeah, I would say that's the larger the institution you work for is, the more likely you won't have to worry about your personal safety, at least in my own personal experience.
I mean, I can add to the voice thing. I get misgendered a lot on the phone. So I'm always just like, oh yeah, I am actually a woman with a really deep voice. I am, you know, apologize for, you know, sounding like the way I do. I have a way of just trying to, like, you know, let's get past it. I'm a woman. Don't, you know, just man me or something like that, you know? So, and, you know, I try to be nice about it. It's been something that's been just all the time. And now I'm just so tired of it. I've actually tried to look at, you know, what sort of surgery can I just do and get this over with?
I can hook you up with a really good speech pathologist.
I am actually trying to look at the speech pathology route first. I think I have a pretty nice range and I don't want to lose it.
Oh, I mean, I can still do my dead voice. You don't lose it.
Oh,
I can still go really low, baby.
I croon in the shower in the mornings, but my voice is really low. It's like, oh, you know, it's really low like this, and it's like, you know, it's better in the morning, and later in the day it's not so good. But yeah, like I get really frustrated. Like nobody seems to actually use their perception and look at me. I'm not a man. I've done everything I can visually to dissuade people from thinking that. And yeah, the voice, it's interesting. Yeah.
Well,
Gabby,
for what
do you
it's
have
worth,
any?
like your voice sounds feminine to me, and like
I know, and that's what I hear. That's what everyone says. Like, you sound just right. You sound fine, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm not. You know, no. It's
Yeah,
it's not
I think
good.
it's one of those cases where like you're your own worst critic. Because like I mean, I definitely like I hear my because like when I'm editing my videos or whatever, like I hear my voice, I'm just like, that sounds too masculine. I don't
I
like
mean, yeah, I mean, like there is the phenomenon where your
Mhm,
voice in your head is actually not the voice
Mhm.
that other way people
yeah,
listen
Mhm.
to. And even whenever I do listen to like my own recordings, I sound better. But also, there's people on the phone that think that I'm a guy, and I'm just like, I'm not. Even with my, my changed name is very close to my dead name. There's people at work that think that pronounce it as the dead name, and I'm like, no, no. So I'm actually kind of rethinking, like maybe I should have changed my name to something way more feminine than that, like Pippi or something. Like, I mean,
No, I mean, I don't think you're doing anything wrong. I mean, you don't live your life to appease the random people on the phone who are going to misgender you anyway, regardless of what you do. So, like, of course, like, there's always work.
yeah,
I mean, like, it's like, again, we're our own worst critic. It's like, there's always something that we could do that's like, oh, it's like, well, if I could do this, or if I look like this, or if this part of my body was more like this. But you should be doing like whatever changes you're making should be for your own sense of well-being and your own kind of sense of accomplishment and to make you feel like a better version of yourself. It shouldn't be to appease other people, especially other people that like you're never going to talk to again. So
yeah, I mean it
yeah.
is. And there is there is the level of safety that I have in real life of where I live, which is
Mhm.
not a it's not a progressive city. It is the country with a lot of people that would rather not see me around.
Oh,
So, in order to
I
fade into
know.
the
I've been to
woodwork a
your
little bit,
neighborhood. I we've
yeah,
seen we've seen the Trump house in your neighborhoods.
yeah, don't
Pretty
blame me.
adventure.
I
Oh my
voted for
god.
Trump.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
It is the most over
it's
the top
ridiculous.
like okay, picture like the most over the top Halloween or Christmas decoration house you can possibly think of, except instead of the Christmas or Halloween theme, it's Trump theme.
I should just knock on their door, like, Halloween was like a couple days ago. What's with the Halloween decorations? I mean,
We've got
It's
an HOA
absolutely
rule
wild.
about decorations out of season.
like,
It's like so
it's
over the top that I feel like it's
I'll
just a
help you put
really,
the
really
Christmas
elaborate
lights up.
joke.
I mean, do you need help with Christmas lights? Really?
Gabby, is there anything you want to say about being like protecting yourself at work as a trans employee?
Um, a couple things. I also have a voice thing. I'll start with
I
the
want
work thing and then I'll get to the voice thing.
great.
Because it's an interesting reversal. Um, but at work, I travel a lot for work. Um, I recently had to go to a state that I said yes to the work trip, and then the moment I hung up, I was like, I I don't know if I can go to this state. And so, for my own personal safety, for even just like it's for a client presentation. So also like I don't really know my client personally. It's kind of a pitch, so I don't really know them. Um, I went, everything was okay, thankfully. The one thing I will say, the work trip was with essentially cis men. Um, uh, and I was actually kind of touched that at the end, when we left and we're like, oh, let's grab, team dinner, let's celebrate that the meeting went well. Kind of like on the drive over, they were like, did you feel okay? They didn't ask me beforehand, but they were like, actually, did you feel okay saying yes to coming here? And I was like, my boss actually asked me after I said yes. He asked me like, oh, like, are you feeling okay about it? It doesn't matter that it's next week. Like, if you're not feeling okay about it. And I was feeling okay about it. I'd spoken to queer friends, trans friends. I also knew, I'm going to be with colleagues who care about me as work friends can. And so I felt like I would be with people if like I would had almost like my small entourage, like essentially is what made me feel safe. But there have definitely been moments where I've taken off my my wedding ring just to not even open the conversation when I've traveled overseas in countries that I know it would not be uh safe for me to even have the conversation with, even if people that I knew. On the voice thing, before I came out as genderqueer, gender nonconforming, gender fluid, gender soup, I got feedback from in my last job where at the time I identified as cis lesbian, and my manager at the time said, your voice gets really low when you're insecure. We should work on that. And what I thought was like, oh, maybe she's gonna work on my confidence and like help me get more confident, and maybe, my true self will come out. No, the literal coaching was inflect your voice to be higher so that it sounds more feminine. She wasn't saying that, but she was definitely using coded language so that I could sound more like this. And it wasn't until years later that I was like, oh my God, I wonder if that, like, the burning feeling of literally being on a conference call and her in the background going and for the people listening, literally would make eye contact with me and lift her hand to signal to me to raise the pitch of the tone of my voice, and slowly, exactly, Capy. And I was minimized. Like, I went to a coworker and said, like, I don't think this is right. And it's like, oh, she probably doesn't know what she's saying. So minimization instantly. Went to another coworker, minimized again. And I ended up leaving that job shortly thereafter because I knew like all the way down to my atoms, like on an atomic level. I knew something was wrong. There definitely was a moment in time where I thought the problem was me, but it took kind of close friends and loved ones to be like, no, that's that's when I learned like microaggression. That's when I learned about different types of harassment and and so even just like going through the like minimization process and now being in a place where like, oh my, I'm gonna, like, the moment I get wind of anything like this at my own job where I am now, like, I'm making it a point to actually like bring awareness to, help people who I hope never get put in that situation again. But yeah, the voice thing. And right now, HRT isn't in my current or near future by choice, but never say never. I don't know. But yeah, I've always had that with that connection with my voice of it kind of an odd series of events like that happening. And now I'm like, well, thank goodness I knew to get out. But I know that, not everyone knows to get out of those situations sometimes.
Gaby, I'm sorry that you experienced those microaggressions, and I'm glad that you got out. I know that I had like a really intense argument about pronouns and email signatures with the guy who was the COO of the company I was working for, who was married to the woman who ran HR by herself. It was like an 8-person company. And I got in a disagreement with him about it, and he totally belittled the pronouns, and he started signing his emails with like random identities that are privileged identities, like Catholic, white, whatever, like man. And I'm just like, that is not at all the same thing as like pronouns. You have to use them when you refer to people. Like, I don't care if you're Catholic. That's not relevant to like business communications. And I think that what he was trying to say is my pronouns aren't relevant to business communications, but he did it in this super passive aggressive, terrible way. And, there were no actions taken. There was nothing done to like protect me or reprimand him, besides maybe a conversation that was not recorded and not put on anyone's file. Because like as the COO, he was important enough to protect his job so that the business could keep running. And I was just, the latest person hired. So it sucked. And I also am not working there anymore. Capy supported me in leaving that terrible situation.
That was a situation in which I really wanted to wring someone's neck.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
I had some other problems with that person, but anyway, thankfully I'm not living that anymore. So I wanted to jump back a minute to, you were talking about traveling for work, and actually TransCapybara had to travel for work recently to Florida, which in 2023, Florida is not a friendly place for trans people to visit or live. So Capy, I wonder if you take a minute to share about what are some of the safety, I hesitate to say accommodations, but like the safety requests, demands, protocols. What safety things did you request? And what did they, precautions, what did they do? What did they say yes to? And what did they say no to? Because that was a whole conversation you and I had separately, and then you had to interact with your various work people about it, and you actually ended up going. Yeah. So I wonder if you could share about how all of that was.
Yeah, absolutely. This also ended up being a best case scenario, so don't.
It did.
It has a happy ending.
It does. You're still alive. Here we are. You're not in jail.
Yeah. Hey. So there was like a VP at work is on the board of directors for Out and Equal, and they were having a conference in Florida, and they wanted me to show up and represent the company as a trans person, along with like 5 other trans people. And just like within 2 weeks of me being asked that, Florida, like Equality Florida, I think it was, issued basically it's a travel warning. Do not come to Florida if you're trans. Essentially is what the message was. It's because of all of the laws that were passed, and just the general, like there was trans people were not allowed in public restrooms, and empowered the people of Florida to take it upon themselves to police this.
Which is
and
horrible.
So it was like, why would I go? And you're aware of this, right? And so like I wrote an email, like, if you really want me to show up and to endorse this activity in Florida, then these are my demands. I need an escort from the airplane through the airport to some sort of place that has a bathroom which I can use without breaking the law and getting arrested. And then I need safe transport between the airport and the destination of where this conference was. And I need to be safe while I'm there. And then transportation, and then in the reverse order, all of the same protections, And if you've got all of that in place, I will consider coming. Other than that, I'm not coming because it is just not safe enough for me. And amazingly, this VP said, I read this email over 100 times. Wow. It like deeply affected his attitude. And then coordinated with the conference and the venue, which is a very large venue. And they coordinated by like offering Zoom calls with all of the security people that was going to going to represent the security of the event. And these were pretty high powered folks we were talking to, like the head of the venue, the head of this conference, our own tech company's like head of security, which ended up being our personal, like, it's not, I wouldn't say bodyguard, but yeah, he was pretty much qualified to be one. But it was like our escort, professional. We were escorted around like in a very professional manner, like, and always being checked in, like every day. We would, he would know where we were, and like, it was amazing. Actually, it was like the best security response I've ever seen to something I asked for. And I'm like, well, if you've got all of this in place, I'm definitely coming, just to prove to myself and to everyone else that you've put your money where your mouth is. And I am, personally, I can, for my personal safety, I am able-bodied. I took 5 years of Taekwondo. I know how to defend myself. I'm pretty buff woman, so I can handle it. Yes, right. Yeah. Yeah. Get into the man voice. Yeah, so yeah. And so we all showed up, and we stood on stage and we did our thing, and it was awesome. And we represented our company, and we did what we wanted to do, which was advocate for our community in a very professional manner, and raise the bar and show all these other companies, this is how to do it. What are you doing for your trans employees? And these are major worldwide companies attending this conference, and this is probably why, the HRC just rolled out a bunch of like new guidelines, because they probably talked to me while I was there. And so like, my company had my back, and that's great. And it's really worth asking the question, does your company have your back, really? And I'm assertive, and I ask the hard questions, and I'm known for it at work. I ask the hard questions, and I expect an honest answer, and I don't mess around. Seriously. And I think it really does like help with the advocating for one's community and one's own like personal safety. Should I go into further detail with that?
I think that was a great answer. Yeah. I love that the person read that email as many times as they did. So I have one more question. This one's actually from the audience for us to do before our break. And I did save our coming out more than once at work question. We'll start part 2 with that. So here's a question from Ghoulish Violets, who asked, what is the best thing your employer has done for you to feel safe at work? So if you can identify a thing, what was it?
I would say less about the employer as much as my colleagues. I would say actually most recently, a coworker, we were waiting in line, waiting to grab lunch or waiting for lunch. And she was like, I noticed that so-and-so, one of our colleagues, didn't get that you were correcting them and saying your pronouns, and they thought you were making a joke. That wasn't a joke, right? And I was like, yep. And a week later, I'm pretty sure my work friend spoke to said colleague, and the colleague now, I laugh about it now, but the colleague now doesn't really use pronouns at all to refer to me and just says Gabe. So like he's kind of overshot like the pronouns and just decided to give me a new name. And I'm still kind of laughing about it. And like, I told a buddy of mine, and my buddy's like, well, shouldn't you correct him and tell him you go by Gaby? And I was like, I don't know, I kind of vibe with it. I'm like, I'm just gonna let him sweat it out and figure
Assigned
it out.
Gabe at misnaming.
Yeah, just like we're going beyond pronouns and just assigning you so Gabe. But we'll figure it out. It's all part of my gender soup journey.
It's
so
like
we'll
the
see.
they them pronoun like shrivel out
Right.
his brain.
Yeah, just like can't. So now it's just like "Hey, Gabe," at work, and I'm like,
Give him the finger guns.
yeah. Just,
What if you changed his name by one letter? Like,
I
instead of
mean,
Mark, you're like, "Hey, Mario, how's it going?"
I'll report back at the next live stream. See how it goes.
So, what about the rest of y'all? What is the best thing your employer or coworkers have done for you to feel safe at work?
Yeah. So in my case, it's because like I work in such a large institution that like there's no like one thing that my employer has done to make me feel safe at work. It's more just like knowing that there are like committees and groups within kind of like the overall public service that's that advocate for these sorts of things. So that's kind of like one of the things I identified when I first got there was this like the Positive Space Initiative, which is LGBTQ advocacy like committee. So the very fact that that exists and gets support from like senior management, I mean, to me that sends a signal that like yes, queer and gender diverse and sexually diverse employees are respected here and are supported here. So it's not like someone came to me and it's like, yes, you are supported. And it's like, no, it's like I had to kind of infer that from the like committees and groups and how people talk about things.
I think to piggyback off that, very, very similar. Well, like the coworker thing, have like knowing that there's like queer coworkers and like trans and non-binary coworkers is really helpful. At least like even if you're not like doing the same job or in the same space, like just knowing that they're at the company, I don't know, it's like really nice for my brain at least. But I would also definitely agree, like ERGs, employee resource groups, just knowing that they exist is very nice, especially because like, at least I guess depending on how, because people can have ERGs and companies can have ERGs, but then won't let them do anything. But the ERG that I'm like the ERG groups that are at my company, like it's nice because you can tell that even though sometimes we have to push really hard to get policies passed and updated and equitable, they eventually listen if we irritate them hard. Like enough. So just knowing that, these ERGs are there and that the people in the ERGs who are mainly, people in the community are actively pushing and working and forcing the hand of, HR policies to be updated, to be more equitable for us. So that's always really nice.
And like that's one of the reasons I'm very visibly trans at work. That's one of the reasons I decorate my office with all the gay stuff and like the trans stuff is it sends a signal to everyone else walking by that like, hey, I'm here. I'm trans, I'm out. And if there's anyone like walking by who may be in the closet or maybe needs to ask questions or just, they can come by my office and they can talk to me. So I'm basically just broadcasting it to everyone who's around me, everyone who walks by that like, yeah, you can be trans here.
Genderful would like to thank our guest for being on this podcast. If you'd like to catch us live, join us on Mondays on twitch.tv/GenderMeowster. Show notes will appear in the edited versions of the show on Fridays on both YouTube and podcasting platforms.
If you have a question you'd like the host to answer or are gender diverse and would like to request an interview, please send an email to genderfulpodcast@gmail.com or sign up via the website at genderfulpodcast.com.
As a gender diverse community, the Clouder wants to assure our listeners that we're prepared to moderate our spaces. We will get positive and negative feedback on these shows and topics, and we have a moderation team on our channels, socials, and Discord server ready to deal with this.
Please join our Discord server at discord.gg/Meowster to meet the community and get a regular digest of solidarity resources. You can also support us with subscriptions on Patreon, following and reviewing us on your favorite podcasting platform, or engaging with our posts and content on social media at GenderfulPod and at GenderMeowster.
You can take a few minutes to rate the show. We will post any 5-star reviews on our socials, so get creative. Mention a special interest of your own, a project you're working on, or even say hi to your comfort person in your review. What power!
This show is made possible by volunteers, tips, and subscriptions. Shout Shout out to the folks helping us coordinate guests, edit the podcast, moderate the live chat, and post on our socials.
Here's our artist credit. Genderful is hosted by Miranda and GenderMeowster. Genderful's pre-show is wrangled by JuiceTex. Genderful's live stream is produced by Mirami. Genderful is edited and mixed by Transgriffin and Free Range Megs. Genderful's promos and thumbnail graphic are designed by Transgriffin. Genderful's social media is managed by Kamesy. Genderful's theme song is called Hope by Free Range Megs, also known as Soma. The current GenderMeowster logo was designed by Siptopia. Genderful is the intellectual property of GenderMeowster. All rights reserved.
Trans rights are human rights. That's right.